right, y'all ready to start?
I don't know.
Talking blueberries.
All right, good morning. So I'm going to be talking about coaching leadership today. As we were kind of talking about before this, this was a extremely broad and detailed topic. I attempted to take the most macro view I possibly can. So what this is going to cover is theories of leadership and then common styles of leadership. I should call this coaching leadership part 1 then. Part 2 will maybe cover efficacy of styles and applications of different styles. But for right now, this is going to cover theories of leadership and styles of leadership, and then kind of bring it back together and talk about what leadership looks like at the end. So there's 3 points I want you guys to take away from this specific PowerPoint. Leaders influence change, leaders guide the vision, and leaders encourage others to act. All right? So why am I qualified to speak on leadership? I was in high school. I was a 3-sport captain. Had a big friend group of all of us were different multi-sport captains. I'm not saying that taught me formal leadership, but that allowed me to understand what leading a group of people meant in high school level. Following high school, I joined the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps has a tradition of teaching leaders and teaching leadership at the lowest level at a basic level. So from basic training on, you learn leadership in some capacity. Following the Marine Corps, I was a paramedic. As a paramedic, I worked in teams of 2. I usually had an EMT with me, either a veteran EMT or a brand new EMT. What that meant is I was in, serious, life-threatening, stressful situations where I needed to know what was going on and communicate that to my partner who may not have known, and potentially law enforcement on scene, other people that are not medically trained on scene in a rapid time frame that's life-threatening. Following paramedic, I went to John Carroll University. If you are not familiar, it's a school in Cleveland, Ohio, but it is a Jesuit school that focuses on leadership development within all of their majors. So every major within the school has to take a leadership class focused on that major. Because of this is where a lot of my information from leadership, formal education on leadership comes from. While I was at John Carroll, I played football. And the emphasis of football at John Carroll, I know every school has an emphasis outside of football, but the mantra was to be man of Carroll, which focused on leadership and basically civil service outside of football. So what are you giving back to your community in a leadership role, in a community development kind of role? Following football, I was a coach. So I had to learn very quickly. So this was my junior year. This was my senior year, transferring in from community college with nursing credits. So I had to learn very quickly how to distinguish myself as a coach from my peers that I just played last season with. That was I was thrown into the fire with that. Basically, my strength coach during football came to me and said, dude, you're 25, whatever I was. You're trying to play football with a bunch of 19-year-olds. You're not going to keep up. If you're serious about, being a coach, come work with me. So November, we finished playoffs. I think second round that year. We finished our playoffs. I was coaching with him that next week. So making that distinction that I'm no longer a player. I can't just, be in the weight room joking around with these guys anymore. I have to actually be a leader in the weight room with my peers. Was kind of an eye-opening experience of what true coaching leadership looked like. Following that, strength and conditioning coaching. So we lead every day, whether that's, small groups, large groups, from youth all the way up through whatever levels we've all worked with. So understanding leadership at that level with a bunch of different skill levels, different athleticism ability, different walks of life, just understanding the diverse group of people that we work with. Following that, the last job I was at, I was a director of a stand-up program. So basically I was called out there and said, hey, we've never had a strength coach before. We don't even know what this looks like. Can you help us build this program? Built the weight room, built the program from the ground up, long-term athlete development model from the middle school through the high school, worked with the pro football team that would come there for camp. All of that brand new, developed that in the 2 years I was there and turned it over to the person that replaced me. Which brings us to H2F and what we do now, where we work with our command teams and try to try to be leaders of physical fitness within this realm. So a lot of that to pose the question, what is leadership, right? So there is a difference between managing day-to-day activities and making sure things move smoothly and true leadership. So a lot of my information, my master's and doctorate classes, as well as John Carroll, it's coming from leadership. It's by Peter Northouse, who is a PhD professor in communications leadership. all of those domains. So this is the formal source of a lot of my knowledge. Second source, Jesuit-based leadership, coming from Jesuit leadership book. So the first definition of leadership that was posed is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. So I want to pick apart this very quickly. The process is going to imply a two-way interaction where the leaders and the followers are mutually codependent on each other. So without the leader, the followers aren't going to have direction. Without the followers, there's no leader. There's nobody there. Like, there's no reason to have a leader, right? So whereby an individual influences a group. A group, by the definition of the book, is a collection of individuals that are aligned towards a common goal. That creates the group. So it is all of us sitting here with individual walks of life, individual experiences, individual backgrounds, all aligned towards a common goal with one person guiding that vision. And then leading influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. The common goal is your vision. So the leader comes up with the vision and the strategy to achieve that vision. Okay? So the second goal, the Jesuit, definition, is establishing direction, aligning people, motivating and inspiring, and producing change. Very similar definitions. However, the Jesuits take a servant kind of leader approach to everything they do. So establishing direction, that is the vision. So leaders develop the vision and how to achieve that vision. So the strategy. Aligning people, very similar, except they focus on people development, right? So the development of the followers. Jabwin was forthright enough to bring us together and say, hey, we want to do this continuing education again to make us better, right? That is aligning people. Motivating and inspiring. So throughout this presentation, influence and inspiration are a key role of leaders. If you don't have inspiration or influence, you're not leading. You're just managing at that point. So motivating, inspiring, and then producing change. If you're not producing change, things aren't moving in any direction, right? They're staying exactly where they're at. So what exactly are you leading in that case? So the change also comes as a culmination of these falling into place. So simply put, for the Jesuits, the leader figures out where to go. They set the direction. They get everyone on the same page, and they rally the followers for barriers in the way. So my question to you guys. Oh, excuse me. So this sums leadership up in the best way. Leadership is the ability to get individuals to work together for the common good and the best possible results, while at the same time letting them know they did it themselves. Who knows who said that? Coach John Wooden. So that is, in my idea, that is the best definition you can have for leadership. So, as I mentioned, this is going to cover beliefs of leadership, where leadership comes from, and then different styles of leadership as a part one to leadership. So, before we get started, I want to ask you guys, response, so interactive here. Are leaders born or are leaders taught? Can you learn leadership or are you born with leadership? What do we think? Both? Okay. Both? Is that generally what we think?
You learn things as you grow up from being born, so one probably outweighs the other.
I think people have choices whether or not they decide they want to lead.
Right. So I pose this question because traditionally, up until pretty much the early 2000s, the academic formal school of thought is you are born a leader, and all leadership styles reflect from being born a leader. About the early 2000s is when people started speculating that, hey, maybe you're not born a leader, but you can be taught the skills necessary that people reflect that leaders are. So what that research looked like is they surveyed a whole bunch of people, many surveys, to see the traits that people associated with leadership, right? So if we said, what makes Jabwin a leader? The different traits that we would say, they culminated all that to say people are born with this versus are these things you can learn, okay? So the first type is your trait leadership, right? So you are born with certain traits that make you a leader. If you don't have them, you can't lead effectively. It's that cut and dry, okay? So this is still the most common belief. This was the most common belief, especially in sport. So in sport, growing up as kids, we've heard that person's a born leader. That person's born to lead. You may have had teammates on your team, like this person's just a natural leader. They're leading without knowing why they're leading, what they're doing necessarily formally, or why they're influential in leading. Common traits, though, through those surveys include intelligence, self-confidence, determination, integrity, and sociability. Again, some of these you can be born with, some of these you can learn. Intelligence. You can be born intelligent, but also not know how to apply that. You can be born confident. You can have self-confidence as a kid. The popular, toddler running around the playground is confident in themselves, but you may not know how to apply that. It goes with all of the traits here. So, key point here, throughout the studies, the 40s into the late 2000s here, very common similarities across all the studies of traits that make a leader, which is what sparked people to think, well, can you get smarter? Can you learn to be more self-confident? Can you have more determination if you're more passionate about what you're leading? Can you learn integrity? Can you learn sociability? So what this does, what trait leadership does, the benefit of trait leadership is it provides a set of skills that now people developing leadership classes or companies or schools or whatever with the internship programs or curriculums on leadership can take these traits and say, okay, how do we teach them? And then formulate courses on how to teach leadership. This makes leadership attainable for everybody. When you are able to take these traits and teach people on them, anybody can be a leader now. So the opposite side of trait leadership, skill-based leadership, which is the ability to use one's knowledge and competencies to accomplish a set of goals or objectives. So you take your experience, you take what you know, and you apply that to the group of people to achieve your objectives. So what skill leadership does, it focuses on the abilities of leaders to develop and polish their skills to become better leaders. So this is what a few of you gave the definition of, right? You're born with traits, and you're able to learn those throughout life experiences. That is a skill-based approach. This is the newer thought of leadership, where this is in the early 2000s. This started becoming the predominant belief around leadership. So there are multiple domains of skill leadership. So the first one, you got technical skills. The second one is human skills. And the third one's conceptual skills. This chart, basically what this chart breaks down is as you fluctuate as a leader, right? So you're just managing, supervising something, right? You need high technical skills, high human skills, and you don't really need to understand the concept. If you're managing McDonald's, McDonald's here in Fayetteville, do you really need to know the big concept of what McDonald's is looking to do in 20 years from now? That's not really necessary. As you get into your middle management, maybe you're in corporate McDonald's, you need a balance of all three. You need to understand the concept now, but you still need to have a high technical knowledge, and you need to have a high human skills ability. Once you get to the top, this is where it gets debatable in sport, but you need a lower technical skill, you need a high human skill, and a high conceptual skill. This is where leaders are establishing the vision. The concept is your vision. I say that's debatable in sport because if you are a director of a program and you have no clue what strength and conditioning really does, how are you able to guide that program effectively at the top? So this is all of leadership is developed within business model. This is a business model of the leadership. So there are three competencies that make the skill-based leadership: your problem-solving ability, your social judgment, and your knowledge. These come from your experiences in education that you're able to learn. Oh. So the third type of leader that is emerging as the newest belief is your behavioral type. Your behavior influences your leadership style. So this emphasizes the behavior of the leader and focuses exclusively on what leaders do and how they act. So this takes away a belief of you're born with it or you're not. This takes away a set of skills or traits that you may exhibit or learn to become a leader. And this just says, hey, does the way you behave inspire followership? So this can be used to evaluate a person who may be trained in leadership or is a born leader, and they see how they actually act in behavioral situations. So what this is saying is you could take somebody who may be that natural leader. You could take somebody who's taken classes in leadership, throw them into a situation and say, okay, cool. But now how do you actually apply that? How do you behave when you are presented with the leadership situation? So there's two dimensions to behavioral leadership. There's a task dimension where that leader is now behaving in a way that is task achievable. So they are focused on achieving a goal however they see fit to do that. The second is your relationship, where they are more focused on developing connections and well-being. So here in the military, the setting we work in, I feel safe to say we are very task-oriented with most of the leadership we encounter with. They're tentatively saying this, seems to be a lower emphasis on the relationship. There's less emphasis on developing connections and improving well-being of personnel. It's all, we need to get this done, go get it done. That's kind of a distinction of your behavioral leadership. So our chart down here is breaking down the mindset between the two different styles. So you're task-oriented, they're more focused on enhancing understanding, strengthening motivation, and facilitating implementation, all focused on achieving goals. Whereas your relationship-oriented is providing resources, promoting cooperation, and fostering coordination to achieve the goals. So they are more focused on enabling their followers to be able to achieve the task that's being required of them. So those are beliefs of where leadership comes from. I'm going to run through, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a very dense topic. I am going to quickly run through each style of leadership and kind of wrap it up at the end of how it applies to sport coaching or strength and conditioning in the sports setting or strength and conditioning in this setting. So situational leadership. This focuses on leadership in situations, right? So the idea is that different situations require different styles of leadership or different beliefs of leadership. Effective leadership requires people adapt their styles. So this is saying that there's not one good or one correct leadership style. The correct leadership style is the one that applies to the situation you were in. There are two patterns of situational leadership. There's directive, which is focusing on your timelines, your milestones. What are we getting done? You're directing them to get things done. And supportive. You're enabling the individuals. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this chart here because this chart is coaching. This is strength and conditioning coaching and what we do. Okay, so this is the situational leadership 2 model. What this does is basically this indicates the beginning of a program, if you will, and goes through the whole development of that program to the end where you're able to turn it over to somebody and let it run autonomously. So your S1 is a high directive and low supportive. You are coming into a brand new program and you are saying, hey, we need to get this done. We need to get this up and running by this time. You know, we have timelines, we have milestones, we have ways to track our progress towards that specific goal. So this is, you're not really developing leaders or developing people at this point. You're coming in and saying, this is what needs to get done. Going into your S2. So, you're high directive and high supportive. This is where I kind of, going through the literature, I kind of dub this as like your pre-season-ish. You're saying, hey, here's what we need to get done still, but now you're going to start developing people on the back end. You might find your captains and teach them how to do the warm-up so they can effectively lead a warm-up. You might grab, an assistant sport coach, your receivers coach or something, and teach them, hey, here's what to do for conditioning if I got something else to do. This is where you're starting to develop the people around you, but you're selecting those people around you, okay? Moving into S3, you're high supportive and low directive. This is where now, I say this is like mid to late season if we're going in this sport model. This is where, hey, those captains know that warm-up now. Let them run that. You don't need to be there for that. Hey, that wide receiver coach understands your conditioning model well enough. Cool, let that coach run the conditioning now. You can stand back and kind of take times, whatever you need to do, but let that coach kind of have some autonomy. This is now where you're kind of starting to turn over responsibility and delegate out to some trusted people. And then your S4 is your low supportive and low directive. This is almost hands-off, and I don't think this necessarily applies to sport, but this is where you are basically there to help big fires, like catastrophes, but your followers are just running the show. This is where, hey, you're not even out there at practice anymore. You got your coaches, your captain's running warm-up, your coach is running conditioning. They're just coming to you if like, hey, coach, we want to do this. That's really what S4 is, and I haven't seen that model much in sport. What I added here, this is where strength and conditioning coaching falls in. Fluctuating between high directing and high supporting, and then high supporting and low directing. So this is where the fluctuations of the seasons come in. The preseason, the beginning of the season, they're still fresh. You're teaching them your warm-ups, you're teaching them effort to put in conditioning, you're still teaching lifts, you're still teaching workouts, you're teaching all of that, and you can find your key people that you can influence. Shifting over towards the end of season, you're supporting those people that are now your influencers, and you're kind of taking a more hands-off approach. They understand what the workout cards look like. They understand how to read the workout cards. Your coaches, for the most part, understand the warm-up. They understand your conditioning. You don't need to direct them as much. You just need to make sure they're enabled to be able to do that. So wrapping this chart up, on your bottom is how you determine those key people. It's your development levels. So development 1 is a low competence and a high commitment. Think of this as you are brand new interns, fresh out of school, or still fresh out of their junior year. They're in that senior summer interning with you. Wide-eyed, bushy tail, this is going to be awesome. They don't know a whole lot of technical knowledge. They may not be able to walk on the floor or execute a full workout effectively, but they're super excited and they're ready to do that. Level 2, development level 2, is you're kind of starting to understand your technical experience, right? You're starting to take what you learn in school and how it applies to the weight room in sports setting. This is where, though, continuing with your interns, this is where they might start losing steam. This is where they start seeing the, 18-hour work days and they're scrubbing floors and it's starting to wear on them. They're starting to lose that motivation just a little bit. Your development level 3 is your moderate to high incompetence. They can effectively go out, run a warm-up, for the most part, run a workout pretty well. You have your base level of competence figured out. This is where your commitment's going to vary. So this is where maybe at the end of your internship, close to the end, where they're figuring out maybe this isn't for me or maybe this is. It kind of fluctuates based on the day, the team, whatever's going on. And then your development level 4, high competence, high commitment. These are your seasoned developed coaches. They know what they're doing. They know how to distinguish between the book and practice. So these are transferable skills that they've developed, and they're fully sold. They're like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is who I am. It's important to note, these do fluctuate. So you can be the development levels. So the development levels fluctuate as in the tiers of leadership you get into. You're an assistant strength coach, right? You got everything figured out. You're super motivated. Cool. Now you're a head strength coach. You're in charge of budgeting. You're in charge of scheduling. You're in charge of all that. Well, hey, maybe now I'm down here. I understand how to do all that, but I don't really want to do all the admin stuff. Okay, cool. You get a better feel of that. Now you work back up through the development levels. Cool. Now you're at a director meeting. Go sit on, go sit on boards. Go sit with the ADs and the presidents. Go sit with all these people. Hey, I don't know if I like the politics. We're back down here. Okay, now I'm starting to figure this out. I'm starting to understand what we're doing. Working your way back up to that development level 4. So as you progress, and interns, coaches, athletes, whoever you're progressing, this is a fluctuating scale. So.
I would say, I mean,
No, please.
Sometimes it may not even just be you. You may get knocked back down depending on where you go.
Exactly.
You may go somewhere where everybody, you want to be around people that's smarter than you anyway. But you may get into a situation where you go there and you just need to observe on the front end, see how things are done, and as you observe, then your quality start to come out little by little to where you become from a person that you may be highly competent, but you're obviously committed, but you don't get a chance to display what you're capable of doing until you got the belief and the power of everybody around you. So that's good.
Right. And that's important to know too, because as I mentioned with the last slide, all of these models are developed in a business setting. They weren't developed in sport. So sport is a very unique beast where you can be the most qualified person, but you just haven't been there. So, hey, you're going to go be the assistant or something because we don't know you yet. That is a very unique perspective on these business models. So the next style, transformational. This is a pretty straightforward one. You are the leader that's influencing a transformation in a company in this setting. So you're concerned with emotions, values, ethics, standards, and long-term goals. What this is, brand new football coach gets hired on. Hey, here's what I stand for. Here is what my mission statements are. Here's my goals. Here's everything I want the culture of the program to be. That's transformational leadership. So what you're doing, you're assessing followers' motives. You're satisfying their needs and treating them as full human beings. This involves an exceptional form of influence. Again, how important influence and inspiration is. that moves followers to accomplish more than what is usually expected of them. That we're doing something this way, brand new football coach comes in and says, no, here's my culture, here's what I want. You need to find the people that are going to be on board or not on board, kind of figure those out, weed out the ones, or turn them if you can, but kind of weed out the ones that don't want to get on with the new culture. You need to, you're going to do that by figuring out why are they so bought in on the other culture? Why are they so resistant to that change? What's their motivation? Okay, what are their needs to get on board with the new change? And then recognizing, hey, like, you're a person too. If I'm a strength coach, football coach comes in and says, hey, I want to do it all this way culturally. Okay, well, I may have reservations about that. And if he's an effective transformational leader, he's going to recognize that I'm a human being and I'm going to have my own thoughts, opinions, reservations. Again, this is business setting. Sports setting is not that cut and dry, or not that able to have that conversation sometimes. And then expect more than what is usually expected of them. So now you're not only the strength coach, but you are the one that's influencing that new culture. You're driving that new culture, whether you agree with it or not, depending on the severity or the level of how agreeable you are with that. So this also incorporates charismatic and visionary leadership. So charismatic leadership, the biggest citation for charismatic leadership is Barack Obama, where he came in. He was very charismatic. People were drawn to him just by his talking. I mean, the way he presents speeches is still studied by orators and people that study speech delivery and writing. So that is this is what charismatic leadership falls under, the macro. And then what this graph is showing, the flow of transformational leadership. So you have your idealized influence, your inspirational motivation, you're going to intellectually stimulate, and then your individualized consideration. So it's important to know that transformational leadership is in direct opposition to transactional leadership, right? Transactional leadership is, I'm going to do this for you to give me something in return, right? So transactional leadership, contingent on reward and management by exception. So you're going to get your expected outcome, and both of them require performance beyond expectations. So transformational leadership, the easiest way to think about it is you are coming in with your vision and you are turning that everybody around to that vision. Next style, authentic. Again, a very straightforward one that people mess up a lot when they do that for the reasons I'm going to get into. So this is a newer style. It's not officially defined. Okay, so it's important that I say that. The definitions that have been presented is interpersonal, where the leader knows and is confident in themselves. So the interpersonal, the leader knows who they are, so they are able to lead from that base. The second is intrapersonal. So you guys as a group influence the leader that I would become. Okay, and then the third one is developmental, where we learn how to become a leader through our experiences, knowledge, group influence, other leaders. Those are the three attempts at definition. So, interpersonal, understanding themselves. This is the important part that people mess up with authentic leadership. You can't fake it. You cannot come out and be, if you're not a rah-rah, like, Scott Cochran screaming, losing your voice every football camp kind of coach, you can't come out and fake that. You can't. It's not going to be real. It's not going to be genuine. People aren't going to buy it, right? So if you are approaching leadership through an authentic leadership style, it has to come from within. You have to be yourself and be the leader you are. And your followers will notice, and your buy-in will suffer, right? If you're trying to be fake. Yep. So another chart. What this chart's basically showing, right? We have the authentic leaders in the middle. If you go around, it's your internal values, so your purpose, your values, creating relationships, your self-discipline in your heart, and then what's exhibited on the outside, your passion, behavior, connectedness, consistency, and compassion. So basically it's saying who you are as a person is going to reflect on the behaviors, passions, all that of your followers. So the important aspect of authentic leadership, right, requires regular self-evaluation in order to maintain the self-knowledge. So this is self-reflection. You can't know who you are if you're not reflecting on who you are, right? So Circling into Jesuit leadership, right? Jesuit view on self-reflection. You are appreciating yourself as talented. You are self-affirming yourself, if we want to go with that terminology. You are identifying personal baggage and weakness. What happened, or what barriers do you have internally that are holding you back from your true self? You are articulating personal goals and ambitions. I am internally saying, this is what I want to do, this is who I want to be, this is what I want to become. And I am determining what I stand for and my worldview. So I'm figuring out my values, my morals as a person, not influenced by, a culture or a team or anybody else. What do I buy into to formulate what my worldview is? And then it's the habit of personal reflection of all those points. So in order to be authentic and to have self-reflection, you need to practice reflecting on those points regularly. So, as I started at the beginning, the Jesuit style of leadership is servant-based leadership. This is a pretty often cited style of leadership. Basically what servant leadership is, putting followers first, empowering them, and help them develop their full personal capabilities. Servant leadership is the epitome of, it's not about me, it's all about you. If I am the leader, I am developing you, and that is my sole goal. This focuses on the leader serving their followers in ways that allow them to reach their full potential and be able to not only do their jobs, but excel at their jobs and in their lives. So this is beyond, hey, you're working as a fry cook at McDonald's. I want to bump you up to manager and teach you how to do that. No, you are helping them. What character traits you might have that are turning you off of leadership potential? What background do you have? What kind of experiences have you experienced that maybe I can help push you past? Servant leadership is the epitome of putting them first, and you almost don't matter. So there are 10 characteristics. Yes, I'm going to go through all of them, but it's going to be very quick. So listening. You're listening first. You're acknowledging that what was said, and you're giving value to that. So even if you don't agree with it, you're valuing their opinion and their viewpoint on whatever you guys are discussing. Empathy. So you're attempting to see the world through their perspective. You have to understand where they're coming from before you start helping elicit change. This is confirming and validating for the followers, and it makes them feel unique. It makes them feel like you truly understand or want to understand them. Healing. So healing. You are developing the well-being of the followers. The Jesuits believe that the leader themselves are healed from their internal baggage and whatever negative experiences or traumas they may have faced through the healing of their followers. So it's that mutually beneficial relationship again. And awareness, you're acutely tuned in and receptive to their internal and external environments. So again, they know themselves, but they're also tuned into what's going on around them. What is the culture like within the team? What is the culture like from the top administrators? What's going on in the world that may influence my followers? So we are highly attuned to that in this setting where, any world event that pops off, we might lose our entire, athlete base. Can't say athlete, but athlete base, right? So we may lose everybody we work with because they got to go deal with whatever popped off. So we are acutely attuned to world events specifically. Persuasion. So we've talked about influence. We've talked about inspiration. Persuasion is using that influence and inspiration to help open communication to elicit change. This is not coercion. This is not trying to say, hey, you should do this because it's the right decision. This is basically presenting what you want to elicit and then allowing them to come to the conclusion on their own. Hopefully your influence and inspiration guides them towards the right decision, to say, for lack of better terminology there. Conceptualization, your ability to visualize the big picture. This is the vision again. Your foresight is your ability to use the past evidence and current trends to predict the future. Yes, we're talking about predicting the future. This is where you are looking at, hey, we've seen this situation before. Let's look at what that was. What did they do? What happened? Okay, let's look at current trends. What's going on? What's happening? Okay, what do we think is going to happen based on this? So stewardship, you're taking responsibility for being a leader. You're not just saying, oh, I'm the leader, I guess I got to do this. And then, oh, Bobby screwed up. Well, it's his fault. It's not my fault. Stewardship is saying, you're just right there. Stewardship is saying hey, I'm the leader. If Bobby screws up, it's my fault. extreme ownership, Jocko, I'm sure we're familiar with that. Your commitment to growth. So again, we are committed to growing our followers and putting their well-being first. And then you're building the community. So the important part of building community is you're allowing your followers to be unique individuals, right? So if you're devoted to their well-being and promoting their growth, you need to allow them to be individuals. Our office is the perfect example of building the community. We allow people to be individuals, as was alluded to yesterday with the going away speech, is allowing Brooke to be an individual. So these are the characteristics of servant leadership. So to sum all of that up in the Jesuit view, it's the vision to see each person's talent, potential, and dignity, the courage, passion, and commitment to unlock that potential, and then the loyalty and mutual support to energize and encourage them towards it. So you can recognize their potential. You could say, hey, Nate has potential, but if he's not energized and enthusiastic about it, is he going to pursue it or not? That's your job as a servant leader, to encourage him to pursue that. So adaptive leadership. In short, this is similar to situational leadership. It's the behavior and actions undertaken by leaders to encourage others to address and resolve changes that are central to their lives. So I said that this is similar to situational, as in you are adapting the best leadership style for the individual. The difference is you're adapting the best leadership style for the individual, not the situation. So this is where you can start getting into Brett Bartholomew's Art of Coaching, where you talk about the archetypes and trying to formulate your coaching towards the archetypes that are mentioned, if that's where you want to go. So it's important to note situational is dependent on the situation. Adaptive is dependent on the individual or the group. So there are 4 biases. Your system bias. These are system biases, problems that are embedded in complex, multifaceted, and dynamic processes that are connected to webs. What that means, the adaptive leader, if a follower presents a problem, as an adaptive leader, I'm going to say, I believe that one problem is a result of a whole bunch of other stuff that's already happened leading to this one. Butterfly effect, essentially, right? Something happened later on that caused all this to ripple down to this current moment. Okay? So biological. These are people develop and evolve as a result of internal and external influence. So as we've alluded to with my question earlier, are leaders born or are they taught? It's both, because you can be born with traits. You can be born with, personality type. You can be born with skills. That's your internal influence. You can also learn all of that. You can have experiences that happen to you that bring that leadership out of you as external influences. Service orientation. So you're using your expertise or authority in order to serve others by basically diagnosing their problems. So the terminology in the book is thinking about a doctor. Okay, you're coming to the doctor, say, hey, doc, my arm hurts, right? They're using knowledge, expertise to basically diagnose that injury. Same application, but thinking about problem-based. So you're going to come to me and say, hey, I got this going on in my life right now. I don't know what to do. If I'm taking a service-oriented bias, I'm going to try to diagnose your problem and then help you fix it. And then psychotherapeutic. So basically a big word to say community. People need a supportive environment to thrive. Again, you're adapting your leadership style to that person's safety in themselves, if that makes sense. So you're providing the community around the type of people you have. So again, another flow chart to show how the adaptive leadership process goes. I kind of covered all of that already, but basically what it's saying is if you present a leader a problem, they're going to step back and try to understand the situation and then go through, as in, I'm going to figure out what's wrong with the system. I'm going to figure out what's influenced you to decide on whatever you're deciding on. I'm going to try to diagnose the problem, and then I'm going to try to provide a support and community for you to thrive in spite of that problem. Okay. So that is, again, that is the macro view, quick run through of belief and styles of leadership. It is important to note that there are other styles of leadership. However, these are the ones I presented are the most common, at least in strength and conditioning or the world we work in, and they're the most researched and studied as forms of leadership. Other leadership styles, are lesser studied and lesser thought, like fleshed out in regards to flowcharts and characteristics. And most of the other leadership styles fall under one of those domains of leadership. So again, what is leadership? It's a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. I hope that by presenting all of the styles of leadership and traits of leadership, that at least now we can see why that definition fits. The second definition of establishing direction, aligning people, motivating, inspiring, and producing change. This is the Jesuits' definition. Their model of success. So this is important to note of how do you measure success of a leader at this point. You have a strong culture in practice, right? So new football coach comes in and says, this is the culture I want to instill. Cool. 4 months later, are we following that culture, or is it just look nice on paper and, we're giving out flyers to people, say, this is what we believe in? That is your difference that is a measure of success of that leader in the Jesuits' eyes. The culture is strategically appropriate and meets the demand of the service. So again, leadership or a business leadership model. Are you providing a service? Is your culture set up to provide the demand? So football coach comes in and says, hey, I want the culture to be like this, but that is culturally inappropriate for the area they're in. Let's say something like that. That's not setting a good model example. For example, one of my first coaching jobs out of college was at a liberal arts college. And by liberal arts, I mean, I had an assistant coach put on 2-week restriction because she was working with the female basketball team and said, good job, guys. And one of them was in transition. That kind of liberal level. New football coach comes in from hardcore football, like bang your heads into the wall, let's go. Comes in and says, all right, here's the vision I want. Here's the culture I want. Let's make this happen. I just sit him down and say, coach, with this population, that's going to get you fired, honestly. So we need to step back and kind of figure out how can we do what you want and mold that to the culture we're in. That's culturally appropriate leadership. And then culture promotes adaptability. So basically, the Jesuit model is if you're staying in one place, it could be good, but it's likely not. The leader is always developing you and trying to push you on to the next thing. So what determines a good leader? I mentioned this at the beginning, right? There is a difference between managing and leading, okay? So are you managing or are you leading? If you can answer that question, or you're like, I don't know what the answer to that question is, or I don't know what the difference is, you're likely managing. It's important to note that people can be great managers. You can have the organizational skills. You can have the get it doneness, whatever you need to, but you can be a poor leader. People cannot be inspired by you, not influenced by you. You can get stuff done, but not be inspiring the followers to be be better people. In order to answer this question, you can't answer that question for yourself. Your culture, your buy-in, your athletes, the people that you inspire or the team you're responsible for will be the one to answer that for you, whether you like the answer or not. What is your priority? So what are you focused on, right? Jabwin says, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but it's not about me, it's about the team. It's about everything we do, it's not about us as coaches. I was taught very early on by that college coach that grabbed me and said, hey, coach with me. You're ultimately a support coach. You have a major responsibility in the success or failure of that team. But when they win a championship, people really shouldn't know your name for that. They should know, your players. They should know your equipment managers, the people that make that stuff happen. But you are largely support. They shouldn't know who you are. I have evolved from that thinking a little bit further, but at the time that kind of resonated with me. He always cited Northwestern's coach, assistant coach, that would wear the child small polo, put Vaseline on in the middle of winter and be like dancing around the sidelines. Said that's not what a coach is. Because ESPN's sitting there, hey, look at this guy, and the game's like, that's not what your job is. So what are you focused on? We covered all the models. All the models put the person first, or the situation first, but ultimately the situation helped the people achieve that goal. So again, are you leading or managing? Your team and culture is going to tell. What is your priority? Are you self-interested? Well, your team and culture is going to tell, and you're not going to have buy-in. You're not going to have that belief in yourself. You're going to tell a kid, hey, we need to max out squats today. And they're going to be like, and then just walk away from you. Extreme example. Do you have a vision? Or are you just kind of there leading a group of people saying, yeah, cool, let's here's what we got today. No, what's your vision? What are you collectively trying to accomplish? And then they all emphasize direction. What are we trying to accomplish, but how do we get there? It's cool to have that big vision and say, hey, here's what we want to be, we want to win our championship. Cool. How do you do that? What obstacles do you have? Well, you got games now. Okay. What teams do we face? Are we watching film? Are we getting scouting reports? What steps are we taking to get that vision? Or are you just saying, hey, come to practice. We got some games. Let's hope we win. So what's your priority? This is what I was taught. A good leader is judged by the quality of people that you had a direct influence over. So if I'm I've been in strength and conditioning 6 years. I've kind of been through a lot of jobs. If you look at your top tier coaches that have been in the game for 20, 30 years, who have they produced? What kind of leaders have they produced? That is what I've been taught as a mark of a good leader, is once your influence is no longer present, once you're no longer in charge of that person, what kind of person are they?